Yes. Well, first and always, I want to express my deep gratitude and love for Upaya and for Roshi Joan. The enormous and astonishing project of Upaya, of creating it and supporting it and keeping it going in such a way that inspires and energizes so many people all over the world, is nothing short of miraculous. And I've been coming here now for a bunch of years, and each time I'm just deeply grateful and really love this place and love Roshi Joan and the people who are here. So thank you deeply to all of you for being a part of this, for contributing and for benefiting from Upaya. And today we saw a wondrous ceremony, today's Shuso ceremony, which honors our heritage in such a particular and personal way through one worthy monk, our dear Shoryu. It was a beautiful ceremony, and it was a great celebration for the community. And I want to say that Norman and I have spent, we got here about a week ago, and we've spent the last 5 days at Upaya sick with COVID. We feel better today. Today is the first day that we got up saying, I feel better today. And we're hopeful that this will continue into the next days. And again, our gratitude and amazement for the tender care given us by Upaya Sangha, by Wendy and Roshi, knows no bounds. As Norman says, this is the best place in the world to get COVID. Of course, we have a sense of regret and shame for bringing COVID to the Upaya community, but such is our world at this time. So, our topic this practice period is the work, so much about the work of Hongzhi, and the book Cultivating the Empty Field, The Silent Illumination of Zen Master Hongzhi by Taigen Dan Leighton, has been a pleasure for me to read and study this practice period. For months, or actually years, I wondered how I was ever going to climb out of the Tang Dynasty, which is kind of my happy place in Zen. And here's the answer. Hongzhi bridges the Tang Dynasty with Dogen and our very close and dear practice of shikantaza. Let me tell you just a little bit about Hongzhi. He was born in 1091 during the Song Dynasty. The Song Dynasty began in 960 and continued to 1279, so a little over 300 years, similar length to the Tang. The Song Dynasty in China followed a period called the 5 Dynasties, 10 Kingdoms period, a period of 50 years, which followed the Tang Dynasty. So things disintegrated and splintered off after the Tang Dynasty, and then were gathered back together during the Song. The Song Dynasty saw lots of new development, important development in technology and science and mathematics, also engineering, and also philosophy. The Song Dynasty was the first in history to issue banknotes. the first to establish a standing navy and sending ships to Korea and Japan, to Southeast Asia, the Indian Ocean, and even the Red Sea. A chemical formula for gunpowder was developed, along with gunpowder weapons during this time. After much ongoing conflict that extended back from before the Song Dynasty, but that ongoing conflict in the north resulted in the Song losing control of the north and kind of reestablished itself in the south. The Song Dynasty, the southern Song Dynasty, where the population and the population grew and agriculture increased, and a robust economy grew. The northern region was conquered by the Mongols in 1234. And then finally in 1279, they conquered the southern Song as well, establishing the Mongol rule under Kublai Khan. The Song Dynasty saw a very lively culture in which entertainment and literature flourished, as well as education, both in temples and schools. The Song Dynasty established retirement homes, public clinics, a postal service. Women were not on an equal tier as men, according to Confucian ethics, but did enjoy social and legal privileges at home and in their businesses, greater than they'd had before. Women gained new legal rights, including ownership of property. Chinese Buddhism during this time merged with Neo-Confucianism, and that became influential in Korea and Japan. Chan Buddhism, which is Zen, flourished during this time. Literature of Chan flourished along with the development of temples and extensive practice. Major koan collections were published at this time, such as the Book of Serenity and the Blue Cliff Record. The Book of Serenity, the Shoyuroku, was compiled by Hongzhi. Hongzhi was a very well-known Buddhist teacher in his time. He was very famous. And he, it is said in Dan Layton's introduction that he inherited a temple at one point that was kind of broken down and had not that many monks. And he developed it over time into a thriving temple with something like 1,200 monks. So he was very well known and very well respected. The title of Dan Layton's book, his translations of Hongzhi's writings, the title is Cultivating the Empty Field. And this title is a Zen riddle. It's kind of like a koan, like many Zen statements. And the hint that it is a riddle is the fact that it's impossible. When we read the title as a normal grammatical structure, it seems to make sense, but it doesn't make sense. How could we cultivate an empty field? What's it empty of? Does it have dirt? Thinking back a few centuries to Huineng and his poetry exchange with senior disciple Shenqiu, we can see a pattern in this kind of discourse. So Shenqiu says in his poem, the body is a Bodhi tree. The mind is like a standing mirror. Always try to keep it clean. Don't let it gather dust. Huineng says in response, Bodhi doesn't have any trees. This mirror doesn't have a stand. Our Buddha nature is forever pure. Where do you get this dust? Even though this the story gives credit to Huineng for his understanding of the emptiness teachings, in fact, both of these verses describe our practice. The first verse seems to be about polishing an object that is dirty, but we know that can't be the meaning. We know that we aren't trying to get something done. We are not engaging in subject-object, past, present, future thinking, and we aren't passing judgment on dust, as that first verse seems to imply. If we take these two verses together and not in opposition to each other, and think of who we humans are and what we humans do, we might see that we are mirror polishers by nature. We arrange things, we clean things, because we are built that way. If we settle ourselves on that way of thinking of ourselves, it changes everything. We're not trying to rid the mirror of dust. It's just that when we see dust on the mirror, we're inclined to wipe it clean. It's just who we are. Just refrain from passing judgment on the dust. There is a fish, the California state marine fish. It's called the Garibaldi, which I've seen occasionally in Monterey, but more commonly in Southern California kelp forests around the Channel Islands and also closer to the coast. Their family behaviors are very specific. The female lays a clutch of eggs, maybe on the side of a rock, and the male protects the clutch by patrolling the area, picking up stones and debris brought close by the current in his mouth and moving them a distance away, and dropping stones on divers that get too close. Also charging at divers that get too close. Now, this is not a large fish, and it has no defensive body parts like sharp fins. This fish doesn't hate me. It doesn't wish me harm, or to my family either, or to my community. It just does its dance when it's time to defend the eggs. And the Garibaldi does its dance 100%, all in, not distracted, not resentful, not looking at his watch or handheld device. This is how we work at a Zen practice place. We polish mirrors, sweep walkways, harvest and prepare food, clarify tasks through conversation until the bell sounds or the task is complete. Similarly to polishing a mirror, cultivating the empty field, a Zen riddle, is not a verb-object phrase. We cultivate, period. We cultivate because we are cultivators. That's just how we roll. Through our practice, we find that cultivating nothing at all and cultivating a field of potatoes are not so different. In fact, they're interchangeable in our experience, wafting in and out. Sometimes we cultivate a field of potatoes with no thought of goal or accomplishment, with no separation, even if just for a moment. When we cultivate a field of potatoes in this way, the potatoes disappear. The field disappears. We disappear, merging into one timeless, dynamic, energetic potato being. And it's not really that the potatoes and all disappear. The sense of separation disappears, and the usual sense of time disappears. I think babies and young children spend a lot of time in this place. And as adults, I think we fall into such moments frequently. The moment may not last, it can't. But moments like this, which I believe occur every day, we start to notice when we take up meditation practice. Have you ever gone for a walk in the woods with your head completely occupied by matters of the day? Maybe conflict, maybe the pressure of what has to get done, maybe the details of what you hope might happen in the future. It happens to me. I'll be walking along, immersed in thought, then turn a corner and see in front of me the flowing creek. Suddenly, the sound of the water fills everything. The field of sound that was here all along as I walked on the trail by the creek enters my field of awareness. There is no past, present, or future, because the mind in such a moment does not think that way. There is only the field of sound of the flowing creek, startling, immediate. The sound enters my body. The sound is my body. Boundaries dissolve. Then the moment changes. Maybe I'm back to my thinking, but I am changed by being immersed in the field of sound, the flowing creek, even for a moment. Our practice is like this. We practice with no goal, no wish for accomplishment, no pride in accomplishment, nothing to accomplish, any more than we can accomplish 2 arrow points meeting. And this is not because it's true or more genuine, and we'd like to be done with our pesky goal-seeking mind. No, we practice with no goal because not to do so is to close ourselves off from the depth and fullness of life in this moment. Our hearts ache for direct, whole body immersion because that is where we are connected. That is where our home is. This home is our utmost sincerity, the place of love, dignity, and depth. Accomplishments, comparisons, goals don't dominate here, nor do they disappear. They are just tools that we pick up to use for a particular task, then put down. And in this way, nothing is excluded, not our ambitions or our accomplishments or our goals. It's just that these things take their proper place in our hearts and minds, in our relationships, in our daily lives, in our practice. I'd like to share with you Hongzhi's talk called Practice of True Reality. The practice of true reality is simply to sit serenely in silent introspection. Someone brought up the word introspection the other day in seminar or Enzo, I can't remember. And I'd also been thinking of the word introspection. Introspection, looking within, examining one's own mental and emotional processes, It's an okay description for meditation. Silent illumination, shikantaza practice, however, is more inclusive than that. So this brings up an important point to remind ourselves of when we read Buddhist material, that there are no perfect words to describe and express what we are doing. We need to do our best to enter the meaning intended, talk it over with each other, try it on for ourselves, and not get stuck on the words, and also not get too critical. Dogen says, take the backward step and turn your light inward to illuminate the self. I don't know this, but I think Taigen is using introspection for take the backward step. Take the backward step, after all, is useless in English. We only understand it after we understand it. It's like think not thinking. What is think not thinking? Non-thinking. Not that helpful. Translators and writers are always making decisions about when to find the closest word, say in English, and when to leave the original language alone for us to ponder. I like to have both, so the conversation includes different people's decisions and reasons for them, different sensibilities. So the practice of true reality is simply to sit serenely in silent introspection. Hongzhi continues, when you have fathomed this and cannot be turned around by external causes and conditions, when you have fathomed this, you cannot be turned around by external causes and conditions. This empty, wide open mind is subtly and correctly illuminating. Spacious and content, without confusion from inner thoughts or grasping, effectively overcome habitual behavior and realize the self that is not possessed by emotions. So here he says, inner thoughts of grasping, habitual behavior possessed by emotions. This is the patient grunt work of zazen. When we identify a grasping thought, habitual behavior, like a knee-jerk response to something, or being swept away by emotion, we feel it in our body. We refrain from engaging the accompanying thought and allow it to fall away like rain on the roof of its own weight in its own time. This work makes us more patient. So maybe there is something to gain in this practice. The thing is, we often get swept away before we know it, before we identify the grasping thought, the habitual thought, the runaway emotion. In that case, whenever we finally come back to our body, breathe in and out and allow the rain to fall off the roof. No judgment, no evaluation. Hongzhi goes on. You must be broad-minded, whole without relying on others. Such upright, independent spirit can begin not to pursue degrading situations. Here you can rest and become clean, pure, and lucid. Bright and penetrating, you can immediately return, accord, and respond to events. I want to say two things about that passage. The first is, this is a beautiful statement about how our practice, the work of our practice, supports precepts practice. Upright, independent spirit can begin not to pursue degrading situations. It's through our practice that we come to understand the practice of precepts. And the other thing is, this describes how we move from meditation practice to our daily activity, not trying to control other people or situations or hide from them. Rather, from our place, with our own feet on the earth, we can return, accord, and respond to deal with events. We can deal with situations as events as they unfold. Refraining from, for example, the habitual behavior of thinking we're right and others are wrong, that we know what is best, and that what we're really asserting is what we know is best for everyone. Sometimes it may be appropriate to step forward and lead, if we can just as easily step back and allow another to lead. In other words, to not engage in habitual grasping or habitual retreating. And Hongzhi continues. Everything is unhindered. Clouds gracefully floating up to the peaks. The moonlight glittery flowing down the mountain streams. The entire place is brightly illumined and spiritually transformed, totally unobstructed and clearly manifesting responsive interaction like box and lid or arrow points meeting. Continuing, cultivate and nourish yourself to enact maturity and achieve stability. For me, this is a beautiful image of the activity of thought when we are not attached. Clouds gracefully floating up to the peaks, the moonlight glittery flowing down the mountain streams. In Buddhism, thought is like one of the senses. So just as when we hear the sound of a bird, we are not too much inclined to wonder why that bird is chirping to me just now. What is it trying to say to me? Why now? Is it friend or foe? And how am I going to find out? We don't usually engage with hearing that way. And just so, we don't have to engage with thoughts that way. Thoughts can waft in and out, bits of language, fragments of thought, coming and going, just like our other senses. We don't have to push them away, and anyway, we can't. As Huineng said in the Platform Sutra, when we stop thinking, we'll be dead. I'm going to read that last passage again because it's so beautiful. Everything is unhindered. Clouds gracefully floating up to the peaks. The moonlight glittery flowing down the mountain streams. The entire place is brightly illumined and spiritually transformed, totally unobstructed and clearly manifesting responsive interaction, like box and lid or arrow points meeting. Continuing, cultivate and nourish yourself to enact maturity and achieve stability. Hongzhi's concluding statement in this talk: if you accord everywhere with thorough clarity and cut off sharp corners without dependence on doctrines, like the white bull or wildcat, you can be called a complete person. So we hear that this is how one of the So we hear that this is how one on the way to non-mind acts. This is how one on the way to non-mind acts. But before realizing non-mind, we still have great hardship. I find that passage so loving and tender on Hongzhi's part. You know, I think I said last week, sometimes the statements of Hongzhi really tell us that he knows what we're up against here. He knows that this practice is really difficult, and he expresses gratitude and love and respect for us for embarking on this practice. In the hardship of practice, as well as in the brightly illumined and spiritually transformed, Hongzhi's words in this last passage of the practice of true reality, we have each other to turn to and to walk and sit with on our path. I mentioned last week that I think it is so important in practice settings in our time for people to have the opportunity to speak as practice. When we practice speaking in a group, we are not planning out what we want to say and missing what others are saying. We trust ourselves to say whatever we have to say. In this way, we practice trust and courage. Sometimes we'll surprise ourselves. Sometimes we find out something we didn't know we thought. Sometimes we say something that we just don't agree with and we don't know where it came from. And sometimes we can hear others speaking as if the words were coming from our own minds and mouths. So rather than each person solidifying their position and speaking from that position, our words change. They change us and they change each other. We all change each other. Hearing all of us express ourselves in this way, I think we come to feel tenderly toward others. We hear the words and also the hesitation, the uncertainty, the vulnerability in each other. We begin to see how extraordinary it is to be alive, to be here, to know each other, and to be together. Our love and respect for the practice, our love and tenderness for each other and ourselves, our gratitude and commitment to serve Sangha in the widest sense is nourished over and over as we open to each other in our practice. So I wish everyone good health, and I wish to see more of you in the coming days of the practice period, as I feel better and more able to participate. And I hope that everyone is really enjoying the readings that are offered this practice period. They're beautiful, they're old and mysterious, and they're worth our time and more. So please continue your practice and your good health. Thank you.